Let's start by looking at the Eolian Harp, which Coleridge composed in 1795 when he lived in Somerset in the southwest of England, a time when he hadn't yet met Wordsworth. The poem begins with Coleridge in responsive mood as he sits with his wife by their cottage. He is gently impressed upon by natural sounds, scents and imagery, white-flowered jasmine and the broad-leaved myrtle. He notes the melancholy dwindling light of clouds at sunset and the compensatory rise of the star of eve serenely brilliant. Depth of attunement to the natural world is communicated in one of the poem's dialogic elements, the subtle antagonism within the lines, the stilly murmur of the distant sea tells us of silence. In his receptive state, the poet can observe and accept such apparent contradictions. His eye drifts to that simplest lute placed lengthways in the clasping casement. This line describes the Eolian Harp, the commonplace object that Coleridge has chosen as the central image of the poem. It's named after Aeolus, the Greek god of the winds. Like a set of wind chimes, the harp was suspended outdoors, or, as in the poem, left by an open window to catch the wind, so the harp is played, as it were, by the breeze.
Hark, how by the desultory breeze caressed, like some coy maid, half yielding to her lover, it pours such sweet upbraiding as must needs tempt to repeat the wrong.
These lines reaffirm the presence of Sarah, Coleridge's wife. They also signal some of the philosophical difficulties Coleridge will encounter later in the poem. If an Eolian harp is activated by the wind, why is it likened to a coy maid half-yielding, which has an active, flirtatious role rather than being entirely passive? Wind gives rise to the harp's music. What is felt by the strings of the instrument results in that which is heard by the poet's ear. The fact that there is music causes the poet to speculate on the existence of a musician. The fact that wind becomes music suggests that other sensations might likewise be synthesized, interchanged, or otherwise subject to transformation.
Oh, the one life within us and abroad, which meets all motion and becomes its soul, a light in sound, a sound like power in light, rhythm in all thought and joyance everywhere. Methinks it should have been impossible not to love all things in a world so filled.
The poet considers whether all of nature arises from a common impulse which he calls the one life within us and abroad. It's an idea that offers to unite all of creation, which the poet finds comforting. Therefore, the Aeolian harp represents one of the most important ideas in Wordsworth and Coleridge's poetry of the 1790s. The one life is more conventionally called pantheism, which we've had before. The word pantheism implying a god that pervades everything in existence. As such, even a mute, still air has a divine presence. Therefore, it has the nobility of music slumbering on her instrument.
And what if all of animated nature be but organic harps diversely framed, that tremble into thought, as o'er them sweeps plastic and vast, one intellectual breeze, at once the soul of each and God of all.
In these key lines of the poem, I really hope you'll notice that they are an influence on Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey as we looked at in week 1, particularly that core section that refers to a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky and in the mind of man. Coleridge introduced Wordsworth to these ideas, and there are multiple reasons why this pantheistic perspective appealed to the two young men. First, the one life is an alternative to the religious view of a maker who is distant or entirely separate from creation. We could say also that the shared divinity theorized by pantheism, in which everything is impelled by the same godly force, has a correspondence with the political movements of the age, which were concerned with establishing human rights and equality among all people. Pantheism also allows a new understanding of poetic composition. To recap on other ideas we had a few weeks ago when we looked at lyrical ballads, traditionally poetry was hypothesized as mimesis, or imitation, meaning that in a creative medium, the poet was simply thought to copy what he or she had seen in nature. Pantheism, on the other hand, suggests a poet moved directly by God, not just a detached mimic. Coleridge and Wordsworth are attracted to the pantheistic vision not only because it elevates the status of poets from copy artists to agents of divinity, but also because it offers a theory that supports a connection to the natural world that the two writers apprehended intuitively. Coleridge's long-suffering wife, however, will have none of it.
But thy more serious eye, a mild reproof darts, O beloved woman. Nor such thoughts dim and unhallowed dost thou not reject, and biddest me walk humbly with my God. Meek daughter in the family of Christ, well hast thou said and holily dispraised these shapings of the unregenerate mind, bubbles that glitter as they rise and break on vain philosophy's eye-babbling spring.
The poem changes gear now, and Coleridge, maybe disingenuously, dismisses his philosophical speculations as light-hearted, and he placates Sarah by interpreting her glare of disapproval as an appropriate response to his musings. He is grounded by her more serious eye. Sarah reminds Coleridge that pantheism is considered blasphemous in conventional Christianity. Coleridge, therefore, is willing to discount the central exploration of the poem as bubbles that glitter as they rise and break on vain philosophy's eye-babbling spring. He concludes with sentiments of religious gratitude, made more fervent by the guilt with which he now recalls his recent metaphysical conjecture. His assertion that God is incomprehensible to the human mind is an admission that the poet has ventured into forbidden territory by speculating on the nature of the Almighty. As a corrective to the earlier suggestion that all nature, including the poet himself, is moved by an omnipresent God, Coleridge makes the commonplace claim that he is, quote, a sinful and most miserable man, wildered and dark. From the audacious notion that he might be united with nature by an all-pervasive divinity, Coleridge declares himself contented with peace and this cot and his heart-honoured wife. Returning to Sarah, the cottage, and tranquility, the poem has achieved symmetry. It ends as it began.